G'day boys. Welcome to part 2 of everything that I watched in May. If you're new here, my name is Kylie. Welcome to the channel, so glad to have you here. I mentioned this in my video the other day in part 1 that I watched a total of 34 movies this month, so we mustn't dilly nor dally. We're gonna get into the 17 movies that I watched in the latter half of last month that I didn't cover in my last video. If at any point you catch yourself thinking, this girl's alright. I think I like this girl. Maybe consider subscribing, click the notification bell, the like, it really does help my channel out a lot. Plus I have a super dope community here and we would love to have you. Okay, getting into it now. The first movie we're gonna talk about is called Amityville 3D. It's from 1983. And Amityville 3D I think is on Tubi right now, I'm not sure. To debunk the Amityville house's infamous reputation and take advantage of a rock-bottom asking price, skeptical journalist John Baxter buys the place and settles in to write his first novel. But as soon as the ink on the deed has dried, people who have come into contact with John in the house begin to meet with shocking fates. Is it all just a coincidence, or is the house really the gateway to hell? I gave this movie 2 stars. I don't know if it was like revered back in the day. I don't know if people loved it as one of the Amityville sequels or reboots or spin-offs, whatever. But I felt like 2 stars was fair because the movie was so unbelievably corny. It was very much on brand for the 80s, but it really gave me Poltergeist vibes. Also, this came out the year after the original Poltergeist, so there might have been some inspiration there for sure. Although maybe my opinion is not super valid because I did more or less throw it on as background noise. I was working on my shot list, I was cleaning, I was prepping for my shoot, so it didn't have my full attention, but from what I saw, from all the practical effects and the acting and everything, it was delightfully corny. So I do have it on DVD. I think I'm gonna keep it because it was a lot of fun. Up next would be Would You Rather from 2012. You can find this one on Netflix. Desperate to help her ailing brother, a young woman agrees to compete in a deadly game of Would You Rather, hosted by a sadistic aristocrat. This movie also received 2 stars from me, but not necessarily in a good way. I was so bummed by this because I think it was such an interesting concept, and there were so many ways for them to make it an interesting story, but the movie just fell so flat. I think it's because it was just insanely repetitive. Like, rather than changing up their questions from person to person, they would go around the whole table asking everybody the same question. So in almost every round of the game, everybody was just asked the same question over and over. I found that to be super boring because when other better movies exist where, you know, the characters have to make these terrible questions about morality, they have to like choose the lesser of 2 evils, etc. There are just so many ways to make that interesting, but it was like they didn't have time to come up with enough would you rather questions, so they just ended up relying on the same ones over and over and over, and it just got so tired. I will say that the ending was pretty shocking. The ending did get to me. There are a couple of twists in the ending actually, which I did enjoy. I just felt like overall the movie was so weak. And this is one of those movies, I'm gonna compare it to Ready or Not, which also involves aristocrats, very wealthy people. I think in these movies, they kind of demand more style. These crazy rich people that are forcing them to play this sadistic game, they would have some kind of flair. Like, their house would not be that boring. I just wish that more time went into the production design because this could have been a really stylized film. And also some of the style could have played into this really sadistic game they were playing. Like, maybe they have a bunch of bear heads or deer heads or, you know, like game up on the wall. Maybe they decorate with a ton of old vintage weird weapons, stuff like that. So besides the ending, which I will say was pretty good, it just ended up being kind of forgettable. Up next was probably the worst movie that I watched in the entire month of May. That would be Seven in Heaven. It's actually a Blumhouse film and it came out in 2018. Teenagers Jude and June emerge. Okay, Jude and June are the 2 main characters of the movie, just so you know that. Teenagers Jude and June emerge into a dangerous alternate reality after exiting a closet where they have been playing Seven in Heaven. Jude finds that in his new reality, he has been accused of murder while June is attacked while walking home. So all that I wrote in my Letterboxd review was, once upon a time, someone had a good idea. And then they beefed it hard. That is... I don't really know what else to say about this movie. Like, it's definitely about a closet. I say that they had a good idea because this was such an interesting concept. Like, these teenagers go into a closet that ends up being some sort of magical portal, and then they end up in multiple different realities, but like, nothing makes sense. It's to the point where the filmmakers themselves I guarantee you, they didn't even know what was going on. And it's not like it's something that you can even blame on the editing or something like that, like I guarantee you, nobody, not the writer, not the director, the actors, nobody knew what was going on. It's one of the worst told stories I've ever seen. Nothing makes sense. It popped up on Netflix and it sounded super interesting, so I went on Letterboxd because I think that Letterboxd is like super reliable for telling you whether or not a movie is good. Certainly far more than like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb. And on Letterboxd, sure enough, everybody was like, well, it definitely doesn't make any sense at all. And me, perhaps being slightly conceited, I was like, I bet I could try to figure out what's going on in this movie. And no, there was no sense to be made from this film. So it's hard to even explain why nothing makes sense. It's just that I wouldn't even know where to begin. The movie is just so all over the place without even an attempt at an explanation of what's going on. One highlight though is it stars Missy. Well, that's not her name, but she plays Missy in iCarly. That's how I know her. So that's what she's doing now, if you were curious. Anyways, that's a tangent. Next movie would be Stowaway. That actually came out this year. A 3-person crew on a mission to Mars faces an impossible choice when an unplanned passenger jeopardizes the trip. Facing dwindling resources and a potentially fatal outcome, the crew is forced to make an impossible decision. So with this movie, it's kind of tough. I gave it 3.5 stars because I think it's a really incredibly well-made movie and the acting is flawless. So it's a cast of only 4 people, but you have Anna Kendrick, Daniel Day Kim, Shamir Anderson, and Toni Collette. Anyways, so the movie is really well made. A lot of the scenes they do in one shot and they're moving through this really cool ship, and so all the camera movements are really impressive. Also, it's a space movie and the moments when they are out in space, of course, I enjoy. And for the movie being so contained, it does still feel like a very full, rich story. However, the reason why it didn't get more stars from me is pretty much just because of the ending. I was so gripped with the movie, I was loving the movie, and then the ending left me feeling kind of empty. And I think it's because, you know, as the synopsis states, these characters had to make this really impossible choice. However, it wasn't as impactful for me, and I didn't really feel emotional about it because I just don't feel like I ever really connected with these characters that much. We got to know them on a pretty superficial level, save for like maybe a couple stories about their past or something like that, but we never really got to know like who these people were. And so come time for this ending that's supposed to be super dramatic and big, and then they end on this kind of, not like a cliffhanger, but this very distinct moment. It just didn't hit me that hard. Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't really for me. So moving on. This very well could have been my favorite thing that I watched this month, but I'm gonna hold off on saying that just yet, because at the end I always give you guys a top 5 things that I watched in a month. So I'm pretty sure this will be in the top 5, but anyways, it's called What Keeps You Alive. It came out in 2018. Majestic mountains, a still lake, and venomous betrayals engulf a married couple attempting to celebrate their 1-year anniversary. So this one I gave 4.5 stars and a heart. I absolutely adored this film. Also because it is Pride Month, this movie centers on 2 women that are married to one another, and the lead character is a lesbian, so we love that representation. But anyways, the only reason why this movie did not get a perfect score from me is because of the ending. Now, the ending is super awesome, don't get me wrong. It's just that it's very incohesive. So there's kind of a lot of abrupt and awkward cuts between each like twist reveal of the ending because there are multiple, and it feels like they wrote a bunch of different alternate endings, they shot them all and to like see which one they liked the best, and then they just threw them all in there together. So extremely strong first 2 acts. The 3rd act is where it starts to get just a little bit iffy, but it's still amazing. And I think it's such a hidden gem. I don't see anybody talking about this. I think it's a Canadian film, but it's on Netflix right now, so please watch it. I swear to you it will not disappoint. Just please don't watch any trailers. You do not want any spoilers for this movie, I promise you. Okay, moving on to a movie that a couple of you guys I think actually recommended this one to me. It's called Lake Mungo, that came out in 2008. It's a found footage movie. After 16-year-old Alice Palmer drowns in a local dam, her family experiences a series of strange, inexplicable events centered in and around their home. Unsettled, the Palmers seek the help of psychic and parapsychologist who discovers that Alice has led a secret double life. At Lake Mungo, Alice's secret past emerges. So this one only got 2 stars from me. I apologize to the people that recommended it to me. I just wasn't really a fan, but I attribute that to the fact that this style of found footage is definitely not for me. It's a fake documentary, but it feels very made for TV. If you're around my age, or even not, I don't know, I think it was on TBS or something. No, you would be thinking of TLC. Maybe not TBS, maybe it was the channel where they did Hoarders. You remember that show? Yeah, again, you're definitely thinking of TLC. But this movie was giving me made for TV documentary. So that being said, the cheesiness factor was kind of overwhelming to me. And it's not necessarily that this movie was cheesy. I think it might have just been like my internal bias of those made for TV documentaries, but this movie was not effective for me at all. I was so taken out by the style of it, especially because so much of the movie just consisted of these endless interviews. Narratively, that just is not very interesting to me. I will say that I think that the story was actually quite decent. I found the story to be interesting, but because of the style of it, I just couldn't get into it. It just completely failed to keep my attention, so there's that on Lake Mungo. We're gonna move on now to another glorious, beautiful, amazing film that I watched, and that would be Coraline. This is a wonderful stop-motion movie that came out in 2008. When Coraline moves to an old house, she feels bored and neglected by her parents. She finds a hidden door with a bricked-up passage. During the night, she crosses the passage and finds a parallel world where everybody has buttons instead of eyes, with caring parents and all her dreams coming true. I gave this movie 4.5 stars and a heart because it is damn near perfect to me. It's hard for me to put into words how underrated I think this movie is. It didn't get a full 5 stars from me just because there are a couple like little jokes in there and stuff that are clearly more made for kids that just didn't really, work for me. But I did watch a lot of behind the scenes for this movie, and just the amount of time and dedication that goes into the craft of stop motion animation blows my mind, especially because every little detail really shines through in this movie, whether it be like the costumes, the production design, the animation itself. The character design especially is just so wonderfully weird in this movie. I love it so much, and I think one of the most underrated parts of this movie is actually the score. That score I think is just criminally underrated. It definitely deserves a spot in my top 10 scores of all time. And on Letterboxd, I did say on an artistic scale, this movie is a 400 out of 10. Because it's true, on an artistic scale, I can't praise this movie highly enough. It's one of a kind, it's amazing. I know it's technically for kids, but it's incredible. So if you've never seen it, then you should definitely try it out. And Other Mother is a lot more terrifying than you would think. Anyways, moving on now to the next movie that I watched, which was Synchronic, that came out in 2019. 2 New Orleans paramedics' lives are ripped apart after encountering a series of horrific deaths linked to a designer drug with bizarre otherworldly effects. So this one got 3 stars from me because the premise was super interesting and I did feel fairly gripped throughout the entirety of the movie. It stars Captain America and Christian Grey, which is pretty cool. I think for the subject matter of the story, which I don't want to spoil because it's kind of a unique twist in the movie, they dealt with it well. I think it was a really unique spin on something that's been overdone in a lot of movies. However, because it was such a unique spin on this, the story lacked a lot of coherence. Like, things just, it didn't really make sense. It was really hard for me to suspend my disbelief. And on a technical level, I wasn't in love with the movie. I didn't really like the camera work. A lot of it was very shaky. And when you have a budget where you can afford Christian Grey and Captain America, I'm like, why is it not technically more well made? Same with the lighting and the style in general. It was all just very to me. I do think though that I would recommend it maybe for a one-time watch because it is a very unique movie and I do think that it is interesting all throughout, but maybe not deserving of a second watch. Up next in the same night, I watched something that was very I watched something that was quite the opposite to Synchronic, and I watched The Penguins of I watched The Penguins of Madagascar, okay? It's a spin-off of the Escape from Madagascar movies, alright? It's a movie that's dedicated just to the penguins. Skipper, Kowalski, Rico, and Private join forces with undercover organization The North Wind to stop the villainous Dr. Octavius Brine from destroying the world as we know it. Listen, this was right after I watched Synchronic. I was still very high. I just wanted to watch something that was really dumb and fun. Because after Synchronic, I just really needed like a palate cleanse. That movie was way too serious. I also gave this 3 stars. It received the same rating as Synchronic actually, and it's because the movie's not great, but a lot of it did actually make me laugh. Whether or not it's because I was very stoned is up for debate. So anyways, I'm gonna move on. There's not much to say there. Up next was a very weird movie that would technically fall into the mumblegore subgenre, and that would be Baghead from 2008. This was directed by Mark and Jay Duplass, if that tells you anything. Is it Duplass or Duplass? I think I've said it Duplass in the past. Anyways, synopsis time. 4 actors go to a cabin in the woods to write, direct, and act in a film that will jumpstart their careers. Their idea is a horror film about a man with a bag over his head, but what happens when that man mysteriously shows up? By the way, if you recognize this woman, I couldn't for the longest time, and I was like, where do I know her from? It's Greta Gerwig, one of my favorite directors and role models, and yes, she is fantastic in this movie. She's just so believable, but like part of this subgenre of horror or indie movies or whatever you want to call it, it's very dependent on like naturalistic, maybe improvised dialogue that just, you know, feels more natural. That's kind of the goal of this subgenre as I understand it. I haven't really explored it all that much, but another movie that would fall into this subcategory is another Mark Duplass movie actually, and that would be Creep, which is an excellent found footage movie by the way. And Baghead as well also has all of the charm of any weird Mark Duplass movie, but it's definitely not a horror movie. It's more of a relationship drama, honestly, and no part of it is really scary, I can tell you that. And also worth noting is I didn't start enjoying it until about 15 to 20 minutes in once I got a better feel for the characters, but it actually wasn't until they got to the cabin. Before that, I was like, what is going on with this movie? The production value felt extremely low and I didn't really like the characters and I was like, what's going on? However, I did get hooked and I enjoyed it all right up until the ending, which fell miserably flat. So because this movie was enjoyable for the most part and I did really like it, the beginning and the end were not strong at all, so I gave this movie 3 stars. That felt fair, and I'm honestly not really gonna recommend it. Like, I do think it's an enjoyable movie. Maybe if you're looking for something that you haven't seen before, maybe try it out, but I'm not gonna like push this one too much. The next movie I watched is also one of the worst ones that I watched in this month, and that would be All Hallows Eve from 2013. While watching 2 children on Halloween night, a babysitter finds an old VHS tape in the kids' trick-or-treat bag. The tape features 3 tales of terror all linked together by a murderous clown. So I gave this movie 1 star, and in my Letterboxd review I said watch Terrifier instead. Art the Clown's very humble beginnings are not worth watching this whole movie, and that's just the sad truth. Thank God we got Terrifier. We have an amazing movie with Art the Clown. We have Terrifier 2 that's coming out this year. I'm super excited for that, but All Hallows Eve was not it. Art the Clown was truly the shining star of this movie, but other than that, it is not really watchable. The next movie that I watched was called The Dark and the Wicked from 2020. I think this one can be found on Shudder, or if not, then maybe Amazon Prime. On a secluded farm in a nondescript rural town, a man is slowly dying. His family gathers to mourn, and soon a darkness grows, marked by waking nightmares and a growing sense that something evil is taking over the family. So this is one that I gave 2.5 stars, and if you've been around on my channel, you know that's the score that I give movies that are not bad, but not really good. Just very middle of the road, mediocre. I don't really know what else to say. It's kind of just meh. It's mainly because this movie feels like it should have come out in the early 2010s, like Insidious era, because a lot of the jump scares they use just feel like, I don't know, they just don't work for me today. I did note though that there were still 3 or 4 scares that actually were quite good, so there are some good ones in there, and I do think that some people will like this movie. But where I had a problem with a lot of the jump scares, even with some of the good ones, they lasted way too long to continue to be effective, because real shock I believe only lasts for like a half a second or a second at most. So when a scare just keeps going on and on and on, it gets really tired to me. Also, I'm not scared of demons, so unless a demon movie is done really, really well, like The Conjuring or Insidious, I'm not into it. It doesn't scare me. But I know that a lot of people will be into that. I know a lot of people probably will actually like this movie. I will warn you though that even if you are like big on Insidious and The Conjuring and movies like that, this movie doesn't have great pacing. It is a little bit too long, I think. The reason why I say it's too long is because this movie falls into the trap of having just like really unnecessary transition scenes. So like long overhead shots of just cars driving on the road. I don't have a problem with these when they contribute something like symbolically to the narrative or something like that, but these didn't, so you know, just scrap them. Typically those don't stand out to me that much because I can kind of appreciate how they would add some style to the film with some nice shots and things, but with this movie it just felt like there were so many of them. So anyways, scrap that, trim it down, and maybe I would have liked the movie a little bit more. But even though I found it mediocre, I do think that I still want to recommend it because I feel like there are some of you out there that will like it a lot. Also, I want to give a massive trigger warning for suicide and self-harm. Both of those things are extremely prevalent in this movie, so if that's not for you, then please don't watch it. Not much more to say though, so I'm gonna move on, and the next thing that I watched was Friends: The Reunion that just came out on HBO Max. The cast of Friends reunites for a once-in-a-lifetime celebration of the hit series, an unforgettable evening filled with iconic memories, uncontrollable laughter, happy tears, and special guests. I actually spoke about this at length over on my vlog channel. I dedicated almost an entire video just talking about the Friends reunion, so I'll link that down below if you you want to watch that. So I'm not going to share any of my thoughts about it here because I've already talked your ear off about it. Up next, again, will probably make my top 5 of this month, and that would be Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. This came out the year before I was born in 1998. Raoul Duke and his attorney Dr. Gonzo drive a red convertible across the Mojave Desert to Las Vegas with a suitcase full of drugs to cover a motorcycle race. As their consumption of drugs increases at an alarming rate, the stoned duo trash their hotel room and fear legal repercussions. So this movie, I just could not get over the style of it. Also, of course, Johnny Depp is ridiculously talented, and seeing him act as though he is on this insane drug bender, amazing. If you're of age and in a legal state, I would highly recommend getting stoned before watching this movie. I think it's probably the only way to do it. There's so much flair. I literally want to start basing my wardrobe off of Johnny Depp's character now, because the man had style in that movie. I love his hats, I love his shirts, I love his shorts, everything. He looked amazing. Because it was set in the 70s in Las Vegas, so obviously this movie had a ton of flair. I can't recommend it enough, although I do know that it won't be for everybody in my audience, so I think that you guys know who you are based on the way that I recommended to watch the film. The reason why I didn't give it 5 stars, I only gave it 4, is because there are some scenes of the movie that are just a little bit hard to watch as a woman in particular, but that's only a partial hindrance to the movie, because I actually think that those unsavory moments made sense for the characters, and I'll explain why in just a second. When you have an insanely fun, stylized, colorful movie about these two people that are trashing Vegas and they're on this insane drug bender, you need to dial it back at some points and make sure that you're not glamorizing that behavior. So there were some moments in the movie where there would be sometimes like racially charged dialogue or like very misogynistic, very weird dialogue, and I think that it was there to kind of serve as a reminder that the two protagonists of this movie are not heroes. They are not people that you should look up to, they're not people that you should want to be. And I also wonder if that's why they gave Johnny Depp a bald spot in this movie, because otherwise, I mean, that man would have been too handsome. Although, I don't know, that was a really weird choice that they made for his character, but like, I think it kind of worked. And also, it was just a little bit long. I was feeling a little bit fatigued by the ending. Still amazing though, I still highly recommend the movie, and I think I'm definitely gonna be wanting to watch more of this director's movies. His name is either Terry Gilliam or Gilliam, I'm not sure which is the correct pronunciation, but I have a couple more of his movies on my watch list that I'm gonna hopefully watch soon. Up next is a movie called Rent-A-Pal that came out in 2020, and you can find it on Hulu. Set in 1990, a lonely bachelor named David searches for an escape from the day-to-day drudgery of caring for his aging mother. While seeking a partner through a video dating service, he discovers a strange VHS tape called Rent-A-Pal. Hosted by the charming and charismatic Andy, the tape offers him some much-needed company, compassion, and friendship. But Andy's friendship comes at a cost, and David desperately struggles to afford the price of admission. So I actually ended up giving this movie only 1.5 stars, despite most of the movie actually compelling me, and I think it's because the whole movie sort of unraveled in the final 20 minutes. I think that so much about the movie was really just hitting the nail on the head, and the acting was really good, and the whole first 2 acts I thought were really strong. And then where the movie ended up just was not believable to me at all. They set up this character in such a way that the way that he behaves in the final 20 or so minutes of the movie, it doesn't add up. It's not believable to me. And it very much gives me the sense that the writers just had no idea really how to end this story that they were telling. And it's such a shame because it was a really good story. It was making commentary on like loneliness, making commentary on what happens to you when you have a lack of companionship and a lack of stimulation, which is very relevant right now, obviously. But the ending just really left a bitter taste in my mouth. I didn't think it was earned at all, and I just ended up really not liking the movie. And all I said on Letterboxd was, no thank you. Only 2 more movies left. The next one is one that was recommended to me by one of you guys, I think. It was called The Guest from 2014. A soldier introduces himself to the Peterson family, claiming to be a friend of their son who died in action. After the young man is welcomed into their home, a series of accidental deaths seems to be connected to his presence. So right off the bat, I just have to say that Dan Stevens is a criminally underrated actor. You can also find him in David Franco's The Rental. So he was amazing in this movie, and I gave it 3 stars, mainly because of him and a couple of the other actors I thought were really good. I also, again, loved the first 2 acts. I don't know why this happens to me with so many movies that just end up like unraveling in the 3rd act, but this again was one of them. I just really preferred when the movie was a lot more self-contained. Towards the 3rd act, when the guns go a-blazing and then it all starts involving the military and all these people and all this hoo-ha goes on, it was just a bit much for me, and I think that they could have played more into the subtlety of it. I just wish that it hadn't become so large, I guess. And ultimately, it's because it ended up getting very, very cheesy. I think that they could have let the similar story play out and the similar plot twist play out without bringing all these military people and all these guns into the equation, because I think that all the actors involved were really carrying the movie up until that point. And then I just kind of felt like they were all overshadowed by all this noise going on. It is a good story though. I do think it's worth watching. I'm still gonna recommend it despite only giving it 3 stars, but I do think that it's probably only a one-time watch for me. I did note on Letterboxd though that my main gripe is how bad the score was. Like, if they had better music in this movie, I think that it would have been way more popular than it was. But like I mentioned, the movie did get insanely cheesy, and a lot of those moments can be attributed to how bad the music was, and it just goes to show you like how much a score can make or break a film. But again, still worth watching, I think, for the story. So gonna move on to the last movie that I watched in May, which was luckily You're Next from 2011. This is another one that a lot of you guys actually recommended to me. When the Davison family comes under attack, the gang of mysterious killers soon learns that one of their victims harbors a secret talent for fighting back. So I only gave this one 3.5 stars, but I did give it a heart because I still thoroughly enjoyed it. The first half of the movie I wasn't super big on. I do have a lot of problems with it. Like, I don't know why a woman can't just be very resourceful and like have a fighting energy. I don't know why she had to have grown up on like a survival compound. That was kind of lame. And then also like the first half of the movie I found to be insanely basic. It wasn't until we hit a few very major plot points that I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's just a really good fun slasher, and that's that. If you like slashers, I think you'll really like that movie. But because it is so basic, I don't have a ton more notes on the movie. I enjoyed it. It was just a lot of fun, and that's that. So that's actually gonna do it for part 2 of everything that I watched in May.
Hi, hello there. I forgot to rank my top 5 movies of the month at the end of this video, so I'm here doing it now. So this might not necessarily go by how many stars I gave a movie, because there are some that are a little more highly rated that are not gonna crack the top 5. Wow, my hair looks insane right now. That's fun. Coming in at number 5 would actually be Time Lapse. I'm a little surprised, but yeah, just like for an indie movie, it was so high concept and so dope. I loved it. I talked about that in my last video though. Coming in at number 4 would go to The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That finale was just incredible. I'm not over it yet. Coming in at number 3 would have to be Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Just, oh my god, I'm not over it. I need to watch that again soon, because like I feel like there are so many things to pick up on that movie that you could watch it again and again and just see new things every time. And then my number 2 pick is actually at a tie, and that would be between Coraline and the Mitchells vs. the Machines. I think it's just a coincidence that those are both animated. I don't really know, but they're both amazing. They're both incredibly unique. Coraline especially, like aesthetically and art-wise, just one of the most unique things I've ever seen. And same goes for the Mitchells vs. the Machines. Like, their animation styles are just amazing. And then coming in at number 1, I kind of suspected this, is in fact What Keeps You Alive. I think I'm gonna try to talk about that movie like any chance that I get now, because it was that good and I don't understand why more people don't talk about it. Okay, bye.
I did ask you guys on my community tab to start recommending me stuff for the month of June to watch, specifically if they involve like LGBTQ+ writers, directors, actors, characters, etc. So definitely drop those down below, and of course let me know any of your opinions on the movies that I talked about today. If you want even more content from me, you can find my Patreon down below, as well as my vlog channel and all of my social media. And if you'd like to know my opinions on what movies I watch before I make these wrap-up videos, then definitely consider following me on Letterboxd. But other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!